The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
United States. In order to
I want him to show his birth certificate. I want him to show his birth certificate. There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like.
Oh, my God.
That's a terrible thing to say.
Whoopi, I'm telling you.
3 pounds a day.
Whoopi, I love you. I'm telling you.
I love you, too. I think that's the biggest pile of dog mess I've heard in ages.
Oh, those are the gals at The View. I've been in that lion's den more times than I can count. But Donald Trump is not cowed on any of this, and he's under an enormous amount of heat because of his comments on The View, just questioning the Obama birth certificate, and now people are, well, is he a serious candidate for the presidency, yes or no? And Tim Pawlenty actually chimed in on this. Let's listen.
Tell me what comes to mind as a potential rival, Donald Trump.
I think he's talented. I think he's funny. I think he's interesting.
Is he a candidate, a serious candidate?
He might be. He might be, but we'll see.
What do you make of this angle with the birther controversy?
I for one do not believe that we should be raising that issue in the sense that I think President Obama was born in the United States.
Joining us now, the aforementioned Donald Trump. Of course, the Celebrity Apprentice having a huge season. And I want to talk about the President of the United States, who seems to be an apprentice in Libya. But Donald Trump joins us now. Hey, Donald, how are you?
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Great to talk to you. I'm glad you're not in our studios in Fox right now because they're a mess here in Manhattan. So we're glad that you're we're glad you're in the...
I'm doing your friend's show tonight, Bill O'Reilly. I'm doing his show tonight. That'll be interesting.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the before we get into this Libya situation. Let's talk about the heat you've been getting for this birth certificate issue. Why'd you raise it initially, and where are we now on this?
Well, you said I've been getting heat. I don't feel heat. I think he's got heat. Look, he cannot give a birth certificate. You can, I can. I got one yesterday. It took me a day, 24 hours. I got one. I had a preliminary certificate, which I gave the day before. Nobody found that acceptable. Oh, this is terrible. It's not really the birth. So I said, okay, I'll get you my regular one. So I sent down, I got my regular birth certificate. Now everybody said, oh, gee, he really does have a birth certificate. You have to have a birth certificate. Now, when I hear he took an ad in a paper, his parents, these are poor people. When did you ever hear of anybody taking an ad in a paper? I see so much fraud in this world that an ad like that could have been staged. I don't mean staged at the time. I mean could have been computer-generated 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 2 years ago. It could have been computer-generated. I see so many fraudulent things going on, and all you have to do is pick up the paper and see what's happening. That would be like the least of it. And you know what I don't understand is these reporters that try and find everybody doing something wrong. They're giving this guy a free pass. I really don't know what's going on. I don't know why he can't get a birth certificate. His family's arguing about which hospital he was born in. They don't really know which hospital he was born in. The so-called newspaper ads, the Rockefeller family doesn't buy ads in a newspaper. Now you're going to have two poor people putting an ad in a newspaper that their son was born. There's something fishy about the whole thing.
Factcheck.org released...
So when you say heat, I don't think I have any heat. I'm just doing my thing. I'm just saying what I think. A lot of people... You know what I hate most, Laura? A lot of the so-called birthers, these are great people. These are really great American people. These are hard-working, unbelievable, the salt of the earth people. They get demeaned if you. I've had people that are afraid to even bring the subject of birther up, but the birth certificate. They're afraid to bring it up. They say, "Oh my God, they're going to malign me." So I always start off by saying, "Listen, I went to a great college, the best. I was a very good student. I'm a very smart guy. I've made billions of dollars, and here's the way I feel about it." I preface it because I don't want to be labeled an idiot like they do. They have it's amazing. This guy's Teflon. Between that and the Resco matter, how he got away with Resco is unbelievable to me, because if you were involved with Resco, you'd be sitting in a prison right now. So,
Tony Resco, the real estate guy in Chicago,
The guy is Teflon. It's amazing the stuff.
Well, what do you think of this, Donald? What do you think? Back during the campaign, I remember that in factcheck.org has this. I'm sure you've seen it. They released this digitally scanned image of his birth certificate to quell all the charges that were flying around. This was after Jerome Corsi started doing his investigation into this, and he eventually published a book about this. So that digitally scanned image of his birth certificate wasn't good enough.
He doesn't have a birth certificate, or if he does, there's something on that certificate that is very bad for him. Now, somebody told me, and I have no idea whether this is bad for him or not, but perhaps it would be, that where it says religion, it might have Muslim. And if you're a Muslim, you don't change your religion, by the way. But somebody said maybe that's the reason that he doesn't want to show it. I don't think so. I just don't think he has a birth certificate. And everybody has a birth certificate. When you're born in a hospital, you have a birth certificate. And I don't think, and then how about this governor? He said, even though he didn't know the parents then, he said, I remember when he was born. So he's taking one for the party. They ought to look into that guy, because I remember 50 years ago, this guy remembers when Obama, a poor kid, was born. Okay? Give me a break. There's something fishy. You know, when I started out 2 weeks ago, I made a comment that I'm not 100. Somebody said, do you think he was born in this country? I said, I can't be 100% sure. Well, let me tell you, after working on it for 2 weeks, I'm a lot less sure than I was 2 weeks ago.
Now, Jerome Corsi maintains that the original birth certificate of Obama has never been released. It's never been seen. And, I mean, he's done probably more examination into this than anyone. And I've got to say, I'm so focused on Libya and all these other budget matters. I mean, the birth certificate thing is never something I've really focused on. And maybe I should, but it's just not something that I've been able to get into. But you heard Tim Pawlenty.
For one reason, Laura, that's because if he wasn't born in this country, he's not allowed to be eligible
to be president. Well, the Supreme Court had the opportunity to review the case and didn't. Yeah. Tim Pawlenty kind of gave you a sideswipe there in that statement. What do you make of what he said? He said it should be off limits.
Well, I thought he was very nice to me, though. I mean, I understand that. And he doesn't want to be labeled as a birther, probably. I'm proud to be. I mean, I'm very proud of it. I don't like the term. I think it's a demeaning term to the people that believe that he should have a birth certificate, that some people believe he was not born in this country. And when people ask me that question, I just can't be sure, because nobody knows. How about when his family is arguing over what hospital? You know, his family members are arguing over which hospital.
Yeah.
Then he writes that letter supposedly to a hospital, and in the letter he puts a cute little sentence, the place of my birth, and the doctors didn't even know about it. You know, there's something very strange going on here, I will tell you.
Donald, people are wondering, look, is Donald Trump a serious candidate for the presidency? This has been dominating the coverage of your perhaps a potential campaign for the last few days. But what about Iowa? What about New Hampshire? Do you have people on the ground there now working for you, trying to set up potentially an operation there for you?
Well, I'm making a decision as to whether or not I run sometime prior to June. As you know, I'm not allowed to make that decision yet. So I'm making, because of the show, the success of the show and the show going on, being on, the Celebrity Apprentice. So I will be making a decision sometime prior to June. I hate what's happening to our country. I hate that we're a laughingstock throughout the world. I hate that we go into Libya because the Arab League, which is composed of the wealthiest countries in the world, told us that we want him out. And they don't say, it's one thing to go in. Why don't you tell Saudi Arabia and their friends, why don't you say, pay us? You pay us. You want him out. He's a thorn in your side. You pay us. We've already spent $1 billion on Libya, and not one person has asked Saudi Arabia and the Arab League, who is really benefiting by what's happening, by the way, and they're benefiting in another way, because look at what's happening to oil. It's going through the roof because of this. But they want him out. Why doesn't somebody say to Saudi Arabia and their friends, the richest nations in the world, we want you to pay us in spades. We want you to pay us $5 billion, and we'll rid you of this problem. We are paying this cost. And by the way, you know where Libyan oil goes to? China. We don't get oil from Libya. China gets the oil from Libya. It's unbelievable.
France has made an enormous amount of money off Libya as well. The president spoke to most of the major anchors yesterday, Donald, after, look, his poll numbers just came out. They're disastrously low.
He's a disaster. He shouldn't be president. He's a total disaster.
His reelection, you use disaster almost as much as I do as a word.
No,
I
mean,
use
the
it all
man
the time.
should not be president. And I'm not talking about because of the fact he has no birth certificate, maybe for that too. But this is not a man that's equipped to be president. It's very interesting. I saw yesterday something. He is there because he wrote a book that is supposed to be a great genius book, like he's supposed to be some kind of a brilliant guy, which I dispute, by the way. And the book is brilliant. And now they're saying he didn't write it.
Bill Ayers says he wrote it.
His second book was written by a guy who's like about a sophomore in high school. So he wrote a second book, which was not nearly the capability. And they say that Ayers...
Audacity of Hope. Yeah, the Audacity of Hope, but the Dreams of My Father was Bill Ayers.
Well, they say Dreams of My Father was genius, and they give him full credit. But now it's coming out that Bill Ayers wrote it. And he's only there because of Dreams of My Father. I mean, that's what started him onto this road where he became president, where he beat up
I want you to hear,
Clinton.
Donald, the question posed by the anchors yesterday, after now it turns out the Libyan rebels are now retreating. After all these bombs have dropped, they're retreating from oil ports, and Gaddafi's forces are still moving with tanks. He's asked about arming the rebels. Will we now, despite what you said about this being a quickie operation handed off to NATO, will you arm the rebels? This is what the president said to Brian Williams.
So we have a clear sense of who they are, and so far they're saying the right things, and most of them are professionals, lawyers, doctors, people who appear to be credible.
What do you think about that answer?
Well, I don't know that they're credible because I hear more and more. You know, since I've been into this political world, and I've really been there for a long time in my life, and I've been involved with politicians and politics for a long time, but I'm hearing more and more that they're involved very closely with Iran and with Al-Qaeda. And I'm hearing it more and more from more people. Wouldn't that be something if we made it possible for them to take over and we end up with a worse situation than we had before?
No, more dangerous, and we're still dealing with the Taliban having some of our old rocket-fired shoulder missiles that we gave them to fight the Soviets in the 79 invasion of Afghanistan. And now we're going to arm people that we think are doctors and lawyers? How many doctors and lawyers are running around with U.S. weaponry that we trust?
If we went in, we should have
here.
gone in immediately because he was ready to fall, and then all of a sudden he knocked the hell out of so many of them that, you know, they don't have the same power that they had. And now I understand he's doing it again. And we're either in a war or we're not. But you know what? My other statement, I say this. In the old days, you'd have a war, you take over a country. We have wars and we leave, and we hand the country over to people that don't like us. And as an example, Iraq. As sure as you're sitting there, Iraq will be taken over by Iran because they want the oil. They also want the country, but they want the oil. 15 minutes after we're gone, and all of those soldiers, those great soldiers, men and women, will have died in vain, in addition to spending $1.5 trillion on this war instead of building up our own country. So as sure as you're sitting there, so if that's going to be the case, why don't we Iraq is the second largest oil fields in the world. I don't know if you even know that, but Iraq is second only to Saudi Arabia. Why don't we take over the oil fields? What, are we going to give it over to Iran? Iran's going to walk in. You know, for years and years, for hundreds of years, they'd fight each other, and they were sort of equal. So one would go 2 feet, the other one would go 2 feet the other way. They protected each other by fighting because they were about the same. We have so denuded Iraq that Iran can walk in right now. And, of course, it's a corrupt government aside from everything else, so they probably don't even have to. They probably can pay their way in and not a shot has to be fired. So as soon as we leave, Iran's going to take over not only the great oil fields, but they're going to take over the
No, it's a
country.
disaster. Well, and I was in Iraq broadcasting. I think I did the first national radio show out of Iraq, and I asked General Casey at the time, what about this Iranian influence in during this conflict? And I kind of was brushed off when I asked the question in 2006. Of course, now we're finding out all the information. Donald, one final question. Jeb Bush is considered a candidate for the presidency by many in 2016. Would you encourage him if he thinks he has the answers and he could defeat Obama to get in now, someone like him or Chris Christie?
Well, Chris Christie's a very good friend of mine. I really love him. I don't know Jeb so much, but I can tell you that I think the Bush era has really hurt us. And, you know, the Bush era gave us Obama. Without Bush and without the mistakes that Bush made, we wouldn't have Obama as president right now. And honestly, in all fairness to John McCain and Sarah Palin, you could not have won that election. And Bush gave us Obama. So at this moment, I just don't want to hear about Bush.
Yeah. Well, that's music to my ears. Donald Trump, great to talk to you as always. We really appreciate it.
Take
care,
much,
Donald.
Laura.
All right, you take care.
Tonight. I hope I do a good job.
I will. I'll watch. I'll for sure watch. You take care. We're going to take a break. Donald Trump on The Laura Ingraham Show.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.